open the meeting. Are there any, looking at the agenda, are there any agenda changes?
I just have an announcement at the end.
Okay. We will have time for that. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So no agenda changes. Next is public comments for non-agenda items. Is everyone here for an agenda item? Okay. So let's move right into that. The Hannaford Project discussion, where we're going to review Alex is going to give a overview
and give you a brief overview of the project. Many of you are familiar with it already, but the point of tonight's discussion, as you talked about at your last meeting, is to decide whether the Planning Commission wants to formally comment to the DRB on the application, which this planning, well, not this planning commission, but the former planning commission back in 2010 did. And you said at your last meeting you wanted to discuss that. So I will.
Alex, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
About that? I think you mentioned in the last meeting that last time around, when the planning commission did comment, they did because the DRB had requested that the planning commission comment? It did,
No, actually, it was driven by the planning commission
Okay.
itself. Yeah,
That's what I wanted to clarify.
The planning commission was pretty concerned about the official map compliance of the project and didn't, as you saw from the materials from last time, they didn't comment on anything else, but they did feel like they needed to comment on that particular compliance issue. All right, so I'll bring up the plans here and just give you the quick overview or pencil sketch of the project. And we can take a look at the official map to the extent that that's something you'd like to look at as well. And I think it'll be easier to see if I turn the lights off. Am I gonna ruin everything for the audience if I do this? Okay. Barbara, could you move your water bottle? Thanks. Okay, so, as everyone knows, the Hannaford Project is proposed for Lot 15 on Commerce Street. We call it Lot 15 because it's part of a commercial subdivision that the Giroux family did quite some time ago. It's a large lot that's remaining on the property. It's the meadow that you see behind the National Bank of Middlebury and the post office. And this is it here. So it has a strip that goes out to Commerce Street, and then it expands and occupies this shape. And so it technically fronts on Mechanicsville Road, although the canal separates it from the road, and it has a very small frontage on Commerce Street itself. There's the National Bank of Middlebury. There's the post office. This is Mechanicsville Road and the canal. This is Route 116 and Commerce Street. So I think everybody probably knows where it is. The project itself is principally located on Lot 15, but it has impacts and we'll be making changes to areas off of that lot, including a proposed new sidewalk segment along the Dark Star frontage where there's a missing sidewalk segment, as well as pretty substantial stormwater infrastructure underneath Commerce Street. And then a replacement of a culvert here underneath Commerce Street. And I believe some improvements to the stormwater receiving or detention area that is between the mobile station and tailhook towing. We can talk about all the various other changes and traffic mitigation that they've proposed, but the crux of the project is here, and then those other infrastructure elements that I noted. So if I go to the next sheet, you can see the site itself a little more clearly. This is the proposed store. It's approximately 36,000 square feet. This is the large parking area, and there's a smaller parking area on this side of the building. This is the access coming in, a portion of which already exists to access the National Bank of Middlebury. Hannaford proposes to push it further into the site to provide access to the store. What I would think of as the front of the store, at least what will look like the front of the store, is this facade here, facing the principal parking area. And this side has parking, as I mentioned, and this is what will feel like the back of the store, and this is where they have sort of service access. Loading docks are here, and trash and recycle storage is back here, and that sort of thing. You can see that the existing canal path that runs from Mechanicsville Road across that, what's it called, the Pony Truss or Truss Pony Bridge, comes in, Pony Truss, comes in here, and the canal path goes like this along the canal. There's a pretty substantial underground stormwater treatment system, or a piece of the stormwater treatment system that's located under a large portion of this parking area, but also under a portion of this parking area. Stormwater is a major issue with this project. It was part of the Vermont Supreme Court's ruling as to why it had to be remanded back to the lower court for the Act 250 review. And it was discussed at the first DRB meeting. We spent most of the meeting talking about stormwater issues. So just to briefly tell you about them, this project was revised from when the DRB saw it previously in 2011 and 12. Previously, stormwater was running along this property line and then being treated in an existing swale here next to between the Dark Star property and the Aubuchon Plaza. There were a variety of issues that I won't go into related to that, and so they've revised the plan to show a treatment area here in a swale, and then the continued use of this drainage area, but not technically for treatment in their stormwater plan, just for conveyance. And then, as I mentioned, the stormwater that passes through this direction goes under Commerce Street in a culvert that they plan to improve, and into an existing treatment area between Tailhook Towing and the mobile station. It's a complicated stormwater system in that they're creating a separate conveyance system to take stormwater not only through this direction, but also through a catch basin and collection system down their access drive and then under Commerce Street to discharge to the end of this culvert that I had mentioned previously that they're improving. And they're doing that to try to split up the stormwater being generated and take a certain amount in this direction away from what has been recognized as a problematic area between Dark Star and Aubuchon. And there's a lot of debate about whether what they're doing is proper and all of that. But in any case, that's the crux of the stormwater system.
Do you know whether that portion, not to get into details about everything, but that portion that is coming out the access drive and connecting into piping in Commerce Street and then eventually ending up in the same location?
Yep.
Is there treatment in any of that part of the system?
No, that's pure conveyance, all
Okay.
just pipes to
Right.
bring it underneath the road here and then underneath the town road here to discharge right here. So the stormwater coming through this treatment area and this swale next to Dark Star goes under Commerce Street and discharges here. And the other drainage area, or stormwater discharge area, comes through this way underground and discharges to the same point.
So some portion of the parking lot that receives water goes through that pipe that does not treat.
Yeah, the way they have it designed is interesting. The how do I describe it? the amount of the storm, of a particular size storm that is called the treatment amount, I forget the right terminology, it's like the first inch or 9/10 of an inch of a storm will all flow through this grass channel here and head out between Dark Star and Obashan and go in that direction so that it receives treatment in that grass swale. Stormwater beyond that will then be diverted in that other direction and won't be treated. So they're trying to provide treatment for the first flush, which is where you flush the parking lot in the beginning of a storm of most of the pollutants, and that's what the treatment
There's
is.
some mechanism
Yeah.
below the parking lot that knows when that first
Yeah, it meter-
inch or whatever
it meters
has
it out
fallen, and then flips a lever or
Somehow,
something.
I don't know, I don't recall the details of it. Thankfully, Mitch, who's our development review coordinator, is a stormwater, he's a licensed engineer, and he had done stormwater design in his engineering life. So I've left him to be the expert on that, and I've sort of blissfully forgotten some of the details.
Have a little person in the chamber.
It's just like in the TV, right? And in the refrigerators, yeah, exactly. So that's how that works. I think, just to cut to the chase, I'll show you a couple other plans. Maggie, did you have a question first?
No, thinking to focus the discussion that.
Yeah.
Which is to decide
So to
whether
focus
to-
the discussion on what the previous planning commission provided feedback on, it was related to the official map. As most of you know, because we've been talking about the official map and making revisions, this entire parcel is shown as a future community facility. So the whole parcel is mapped as being a place where we were thinking of doing a future community facility. And the official map didn't specify what that facility was going to be. That was a mistake. I think Joe Andenza, who's not here tonight, would argue that, when we make those revisions, we need to be more specific. But in any case, we provided examples of what the community facility could be, sort of an a la carte list. And at the time, we thought, well, that will be sufficient, right? Because I think my memory of the discussions of this official map element were that we don't think that this site is very developable. There's a lot of wetland there. I didn't mention that. I would say most of the site is wetland, mapped wetland. It has unstable soils. NRG was going to locate here when they first expanded and determined it wasn't viable because it would cost too much to put in the foundation. So we thought, yeah, there's likely to be maybe one or two small scale commercial uses, and the rest maybe we could have as a town green or some sort of medium size, larger size green space to complement whatever small scale commerce might happen there. So we did identify the whole parcel. My recollection is we didn't anticipate the entire thing would be a town facility, but that a good chunk of it might be. And so it's on the official map. When they went through the original review process, this was raised as a very significant issue. And without going through all the details, in the end, their proposal was to accommodate the official map by adding a piece of property that's not part of Lot 15, but is owned by the Giroux family, this chunk here to the west, the northwest corner, and agreeing to allow this to be used for a future farmer's market location, which is one of the community facility examples that's listed on the official map. And so in addition to this relatively small area of green space, they committed to allowing this portion of the parking lot to be used by the farmer's market exclusively when the farmer's market was running. I believe they agreed to have a shed for equipment storage to allow the farmer's market to use Hannaford's electricity, water, restrooms, so that it sort of was a blended sort of facility with public use of those private elements in order to make this farmer's market use viable. Again, the previous planning commission felt that wasn't adequate for a variety of reasons. You've seen the correspondence on that, but the DRB disagreed. And their decision said respectfully, they felt that Hannaford met at least a minimum requirement for providing the community facility that was mentioned on the official map, and they approved the project. Let's see, did I have any other plans?
Might be helpful to the map and just.
Yeah, I
have
can
that
show you the,
Number 3.
I can show you the official map here, hold just a moment. Yeah, the only other plans I was gonna show you, and I can show you anything you wanna see, I have all of them here, but I was just gonna show you the landscaping plan and then the building elevations. Here's the official map, just to show you where it's indicated on the map. Here's lot 15, so you can see that we indicated the bulk of that lot is brown, that's a future community facility. And this map is our first and only official map. We've not revised it since first adoption. Here in the notes section, we talk about what we mean. And right here in note number 3, we say future community facilities for the areas shown include but are not limited to town green, community center, fire police station expansion, farmers market venue, most importantly, parks and recreation areas, library relocation. So we didn't make, that's not an exhaustive list, but it does provide some examples, and that's what the DRB hung their hat on when they approved the project. Said, you said farmers market, they proposed a farmers market venue, we think it meets the test. I don't want to imply that the current DRB will reach the same conclusion. It's a different board. 3 of the members on it who will be voting weren't on the original board. Of the 4 members that were, 2 of them voted to approve, 2 of them voted to deny, I think largely based on the official map issue, at least the ones who wanted to deny. So it could go a different way this time.
So can I ask a couple clarifying questions? So one, to that point, I'm a little confused because we hear a lot from DRB and other people that they don't like vagueness, but they like to leave things open so that there's some leeway for developers. But then they said this is fine because they didn't have any guidance. This is exactly what we wanted to use this for.
Right.
So which is it?
It depends.
Okay.
When it comes to a home occupation's ability to have a certain level of traffic,
Yep.
their feedback to you was, we think that our existing process and review protocol, we can deal with discretion on that kind of a question. On this question, I think they're feeling, which is pretty clear from the decision, based on the language that was written here, they had no option, the majority said, they had no option but to approve. Because
There was no
because
clear
a farmer's
what they
market
wanted
venue.
it to be.
Well, no, actually, because there was a clear indication of one of the facilities we were looking for, and the applicant proposed that facility. So if my point, Jeff, is that
Yep.
if we had said, it can be a number of things, this brown blob, but it can't be a farmer's market, we're doing that somewhere over here or whatever, then I think the board would have had a much easier time saying, well, the project's denied, because you can't provide a farmer's market. We expressly said we didn't want one there. But in this case, we said, this could be any number of things, farmer's market was on the list.
I must have read it differently because I thought it said because we didn't have specificity and because farmers market was listed. That's it. But anyways,
Well, yeah,
neither here nor there. The other question I have is you mentioned how does the front of the building have parking in front? How did they get around that?
yeah.
Because I know that's a regulation.
Let me go back to the plan. The Supreme Court actually ruled on this, so this is not
Okay.
something that the DRB will be discussing
All right,
again.
I just wanted to understand how they.
The idea is that the front yard of a lot is determined by
The door.
by the closest portion of the building to that frontage. So this is the closest portion of the building to Mechanicsville Road. Therefore, the front yard extends in a parallel line from this corner of the building all the way across the lot like this.
So the address
And
of
that-
this building is something Mechanicsville Road?
No, address doesn't determine frontage or front yard parking from the standpoint of our regulations.
Okay.
So basically, they're saying, this is the front yard, this parking is not in the front yard, and corner lots have multiple front yards. I think their argument was, if I remember right, that this is not a corner lot. It has a small access strip out to Commerce Street, and so this parking, were this to be right up snug to Commerce Street, this would be front yard parking. They didn't deem it to be that.
You confused me. You said it runs parallel to Mechanicsville Road.
Correct.
For front yard,
Yep,
but that's parallel to Mechanicsville Road.
right.
Wait,
So
I'm
this,
trying
so
to
draw a
say.
line from this corner
Yeah,
parallel to Mechanicsville Road.
and that's
All the
front yard.
parking needs to be behind that line. And it
Because
is.
that little corner is closest to Mechanicsville Road and they're behind it, it's therefore not. So the front yard is that little
Right.
corner of the building. Is that-
Anyways, that's not an
Whatever.
issue that
Neither here
the
nor there.
DRB is going to adjudicate. The Supreme Court already ruled
Right.
on that. But let me show you two more plans, and then I'll turn the lights back on, and you can discuss. The only two plans I was planning to show you, again, were the landscaping plan. So they do have, you know, a plan for plantings, trees and shrubs, most robust sort of in this area as you enter the site from the canal walk. They talked about this as like a little pocket park. And then they have, you know, plantings along the edge of the parking lot, and around the edge of the site here. And the other plan I wanted to just show you was the building elevations, and this is not the most user-friendly diagram to look at. So I'll try to describe it. This is what I was telling you is what feels like the front facade of the building. That's where the entrance is to the store. This is facing Mechanicsville Road, with a parking lot in front of it, as Barbara mentioned, which seems a little odd, but per the definition, it's not the front yard. It's a building that has a two-story appearance, but it is a one-story building. These windows that you see across this level on what would be the second story are functional windows. They're not blacked out. They actually do let light into the store. I doubt that they're operable. I'm sure they don't open, but similarly on the side that's facing, let's see here, on the side that's facing as you drive in here, these windows are, you know, real windows. It's got a sort of a hip roof, and then it's got a canopy that extends around, sort of wraps the building and wraps around, you can see on the front side here. So there's a sort of a shelter for people walking, you know, when it's raining or in the wintertime, that sort of thing. It's a large building, it's a tall building, and this is not the best sort of rendering of it, but this is what they provided for their current application.
Is it taller than Kinney's?
Yes, should be. Much. I should be able to tell you the height, maybe it's on this plan, actually.
Looks like it in the green there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna look for.
They sort of have some windows like that.
So this is a 26 foot 9-inch height. And I don't know what the Kinney's height is, but remember that Kinney's has, I think, 3 different peaked roofs. This is a consistent, solid roof line across the whole building on all sides. So it's not gonna have that sort of articulation that you see in the Kinney's building. All right, I will turn the lights back on, and you can discuss or ask me to pull up other.
So again, did everyone have a chance to read the memo that was sent? Way back in 2010, December 2010? And that memo focused on the town map.
The official map? On this map?
The town
Yeah,
map that we just
yeah.
looked at, yep. As the reason, the memo to the DRB is the reason to turn down the project.
Just put in the planting, or you know what I mean, the visual of, so we can see
Sure.
where the farmer's market is.
Yeah. Probably the planting plan might be a good one. I can also zoom in a little bit. It is called the potential outdoor amenity area on this.
So I find it interesting they show plantings in the middle of that, but then in the other plan, they show it as empty for snow storage.
Yes, so that's a really good point, Jeff. In the original DRB decision, there was a condition saying that the proposed snow storage in this area couldn't happen. And we'll be talking about that again with this new application, because I agree, it doesn't make sense that this is gonna be a snow storage area if there are gonna be trees in there.
You mentioned a swale along Commerce Street. Am I correct, a swale is open
for water?
Yeah, they're not proposing an open swale along Commerce Street. They're piping it along under
Okay.
Commerce Street to get to a swale that proceeds from Commerce Street north between Mobile and Tailhook. The swale that they're proposing for treatment on their property is right here.
It's all under that.
No, this swale is open. Like you said,
Yeah,
swales
that's
are
what
an open feature. It's a grass channel essentially.
Ugly, excuse me, ugly.
So, I'll give you my 2 cents.
Let's hear it.
So I have a couple of concerns. Can I use your little pointer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the
Point it out.
red little button in the middle.
Thank you, sir. So, one of our things that we want to have, I'm not going to get into the building and all that. I'm just going to talk about the portion, right? They're basically saying this is what's meeting the official map, correct?
Yep.
So here's the thing that I find interesting. So this is going to be a public gathering place for people. You've got the auto salvage and scrap yard here. You've got a backup where the dumpsters are going to be. This is for trucks backing up and forth. And there's absolutely no connectivity anywhere other than walking through a parking lot. I just don't understand how that fits any criteria about an inviting public space that's interconnected and walkability through town.
It's essentially
It's
a
a s-
couple of traffic cones,
It's
is what it is.
It's a second thought. We're gonna just buy a piece of property and plop some grass on it and call it a farmer's market. And I don't think that in any way meets. It's basically what I think is gonna happen is it's gonna turn into a place for employees to go smoke, and that's all it's gonna be. Maybe a couple dogs.
Well,
Like the one
You know.
on-
in fairness, they have a place for that already. It's over here.
Oh, okay.
Near
Okay.
the
Sorry.
pocket
Sorry.
park.
Sorry. Next to the Parker Park.
yeah.
The other public
The other
space.
public
That's
space,
awesome. Okay. So that's my big thing on it. Is it's just the location. I mean, you can't really tell by looking at this map as to what is around that public space, right?
Giroux Auto Salvage.
Right. So there's the
Yeah, so there's
scrap.
there's the larger map. And
There's a
Jeff's totally on the mark, right?
Yeah.
This is, that's salvage.
There's
Sorry,
Forest Park.
this is automotion.
yeah.
And the actual sort of salvage yard is, I
A little
think,
more to the bottom, but it's
somewhere
down
in
there.
here.
Yeah,
But
between the two.
this is a wide open sea of sort of grassy area on this side and cars parked to be serviced over here. And yeah, over here,
You're on the backside of Dark Star.
Yeah,
and you're on the
loading docks.
Backside of
of
Obashan's.
Obashan's
I mean, it's just
stores.
it's not inviting from my.
It doesn't meet any of the kinds of
Opinion.
standards we've
It's
set
a-
in our town plan for public spaces.
It's plopped in the backyards of multiple commercial buildings. So, maybe they can get creative and do something, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't know, maybe they can get creative and take that plot of land and chop off here where you got some green space and there's parking. Yeah, just something that works with what's there and makes it more inviting and more actual people will use. I mean, that's right where the end of the 4th of July parade ends, so I can people do gather there more than once a year. And I don't know, it's just a waste of space, I think. And I just don't think it's going to be used. And it's going to sit there and go.
It was an
Bob?
add-on, yeah.
So that's one. And then the other topic was, we don't even have a farmer's market. So we have to get one because, right, there's a legal
Yeah, I
statute that if we
think-
don't
I think
use it within so much time, it goes away.
A good question that you should look at in the DRB's decision, which if you don't have, I think it was in the Dropbox packet for you, but read it and read the section on the official map. I believe it's the first set of conclusions, like conclusions 1, 2, 3. And it talks about the official map. It talks about the easement that Hannaford offered that made at least a majority of the DRB comfortable with this being a community space. And it talked about the concerns that were raised that Hannaford addressed at the very end of the whole hearing process in September, October of 2012. And one of the concerns that was raised was that one, that they have a provision saying if the farmer's market is not in active use for 5 years, Hannaford has the right to revoke the easement. And we don't have the Lions Club anymore that sponsored the farmer's market. We don't have a farmer's market anymore. So I think that's a really good question or point to say that if they're proposing the same easement language, this could be a non-effective community space because we wouldn't have anything to go in there to begin with.
So that's my 2 cents. And those are my concerns, is that I don't really see, being somebody that lives and walks through that area, I just don't see that as being a place that people would go and eat their lunch, behind the Hannaford next to the salvage yard, and, that's my, I don't see that as a community space.
I was just in Williston, and I wasn't shopping at Hannaford's, but I was walking around that area, and they have this green space to one side of the building where they have picnic tables and, for whatever. And there's this big dumpster full of trash right there. I don't know it was behind the store, but if I was living in Thistle Hill, I would not want to be looking down on this. It's got to be better screened. It's just too close, too close.
Any other comments on?
Well, I have a concern. I don't know that anything can be done about it, but we made some mistakes when Japrag's Park was granted permission for the pipeline to go through it, because it had been designated by the owners that it was for specific uses. The Giroux must have had a reason for saying 75-foot setback when they created this area. People aren't going to want to leave anything to the town. They can't do what they want with their property. So how can we change it from 75 to 25-foot setback? To me, that's just not acceptable.
Well, in fairness, Barbara, it's the Giroux family that's still part of this with this applicant. I mean, they are interested in seeing this project move forward and would like that setback revised to be consistent with the current zoning. The Japrag situation is one where the landowners have passed away and don't have, a real voice in what happened with the pipeline. Couldn't speak to it. In this case, the family's still here, and I think if they had a real issue with it, that they have a means to stop it much more effectively than we do as the landowner.
Well, I'll say what I think we might do. Time has passed on this project, going toward the 8th year. 5 years ago, a traffic study was done, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is currently being submitted as the traffic study for this current application. Right?
Yeah,
There's not a new traffic study that has been done.
There was a 2013 traffic study that the applicant conducted. They provided us an addendum to that. That was from May 2015, and just the other day provided us with a memo regarding changes since then up until today. But it's not like the traffic study was redone. That's true.
So that's one thing I think we, as the Planning Commission, might want to encourage the DRB to consider. Is it appropriate to do, in fact, a traffic study now that 5 years have passed? The second thing also has to do with the time that's passed. We know so much more about how Lot 15 functions as part of the water flow through this area than we did 7 years ago, 5 years ago, even a few years ago. And I think it would be irresponsible, and I won't do it, I won't approve of it unless we say to the town, we know more about that and it's appropriate for us to consider that information now. it would be irresponsible to ignore it. And it's all out there, it's all in the public records for the DRB to look at and consider. So I think that's what I'd like to see the Planning Commission encourage them to do.
Can I speak? So we're in the discussion of deciding whether we're gonna make a recommendation or not.
Whether we're gonna forward a memo.
So I kind of would like to discuss the fact that maybe we have a conflict of interest here with John, because his wife is one of the appellants in this lawsuit. And that's directly against our conflict of interest rules for this board. So I feel a little uncomfortable about this.
Well, the way the conflict of interest policy works is that it's up to the commissioner to speak to that if he or she chooses and, explain what that perception might be. And I will disclose that I sent John an email and Rolf as well on that topic and copied Maggie on it, so I'll leave that to John.
My position is I am here as a representative to serve the town of Hinesburg. And I listen to all voices and all opinions to do that. And I feel if that information is there, all of us should be able to look at that and decide, does that make a difference? And I in no way feel like there's a conflict of interest because my wife happens to be involved in other actions regarding this property. I have said none of the things that she has said.
But you are married to her. She is your spouse. And I'm speaking to this because personally, I've had experience from it for over 40 years between my husband and I on boards that we've served on in this town. And he has always disclosed that he was married to me and usually recused himself. So that's been my personal experience. You're certainly entitled to your opinion, John. It's not that. It's just, I just think it has the appearance of a conflict.
To say that
For you to be commenting on this because your wife is one of the appellants in the lawsuit.
to make any comment.
Right, correct. As a member of this board.
Well, we do disagree on that. I do not feel a conflict of interest. I'm here to serve this town. I will continue to do that. And that includes you, everybody who is a resident of this town. I listen to everyone. And all I'm saying now, I'm not taking a position other than we should look at this information. We should encourage the DRB to look at this new information.
So I just have a question, I guess, I don't know. So, we know where you stand, John. It's a good point that you raise, and the one concern that I may have is what happens if we make a recommendation one way or the other? Could they ignore it if they decide, let's say the DRB decides that's a thing, or is it just?
Yeah, I can't really speak for how the DRB would react to that. I mean, I think they will take advice from other committees, that they receive. I don't know what they'll do with that. I think that I understand John's contention that he can be objective and speak on behalf of the community interest and not his own personal interests. But I also understand Marie's point that regardless of the intention, there could be a perception of conflict of interest because it's not just your wife. You are represented by Mr. Dumont as well, and so somebody could claim that you have a personal interest in the outcome of the case, and that might color your vote on how to, forward comments to the DRB. But it's up to John to speak to that, which he has, and for the rest of you to talk it over. And I think that's a valid concern, but I don't know if it will have any effect.
I guess I feel like it's a subject that John's passionate about, but it's not like he's to gain anything monetarily from the outcome one way or the other. I guess
Yeah, our conflict of interest policy, or the one that the select board adopted, is not exclusive to a financial interest. It's a financial or a personal interest in the outcome. And
we all have personal interest in all the outcomes.
yeah, the way it actually reads, if I can bring it up, I know it's on our website. I don't think I have it in the packet because I wanted to just talk to John about it and let him take it from there. Let's see here. Boards and commissions. Conflict of interest policy. So what it says on the first page is, I'll make it bigger so you can see it on screen. Oh, and I can't highlight it. It's this first one here. A direct or indirect personal or financial interest of a public officer, his or her spouse, in the outcome of a cause, proceeding, application, or any other matter pending before the officer or before the public body in which he or she holds office or is employed. So certainly, if there were a financial interest, I don't think there'd be much of a question there. And that's pretty typical of conflict of interest policies on a financial side. But this does say personal interest as well. So that's the question. And John is saying he can be objective and fair about it, even though he has a personal interest. I assume you would grant that you have a personal interest in the outcome of the case, right?
Scroll down to the next paragraph.
Oh, yes, because that would speak to what your other question was, James. Where is it here?
Conflict of interest does not arise.
Yeah, no greater than that of other persons generally affected by the decision. So the idea is that you don't have to recuse yourself, and it's not a conflict of interest if the vote or decision on the matter is something that affects everybody, like a tax rate. Select board members don't have to recuse themselves from setting the tax rate. They have to set the tax rate, even though they have a direct interest in that. So the question here would be, does someone who is a litigant in the case have the same interests as every other Hinesburger, some of which are litigants? There are several. Jim Dumont could probably name them for us. And the other folks who aren't.
I think James has a really good point, that, I personally, I want people on boards to have strong personal interests rather than just sort of being wishy-washy about things. I mean, that's what we want on boards. And my personal feeling about this is that the problems come when there's a direct financial interest. But regardless, this is the town's policy, and it is up to the commission member to decide whether to recuse or not. So I think we continue with our
Just to
discussion.
say
And
again, what I'm suggesting is in no way meant to result in a particular outcome other than for the DRB to observe and study and think about what we know now about this particular piece of property. And then, however they consider it, is where the decision will be made. I'm only interested to tell them, please consider this. This is important. For the Planning Commission to say, this is important information. You should definitely be looking at this.
Yeah, I will say that the last feedback that the commission gave was not like that.
I
So
know
if this
that,
commission
but-
chooses to say something more broadly like that, that's one thing. If this commission chooses to say something very specific, like the last commission did, i.e. you should deny this project on the basis of the official map non-compliance, that's a much stronger statement. But, and that would be the commission saying that, not you, but you would be voting on that.
Does it matter what the commission said last time as to what we say this time, really? Can't we say
You can say
whatever
whatever
we
you
want?
think there
You
was
say whatever you want.
Pretty,
yeah.
there was a pretty strong argument made last time,
I think there was too.
and
But that does not mean that that's the only argument. And my argument isn't for a particular interpretation, it's look at this information.
well, the job of as I understand it, of the planning commission is to give guidance to the DRB in the form of zoning regulations, zoning and subdivision regulations. Where I think the strength of that memo is in talking about the intention of the town plan, of the town map, and providing that as sort of a, to underscore its recommendation. And I think we could strengthen that even more. I'm with the talking about specifically the non-existent farmers market. I have to admit I'm uncomfortable with us making recommendations about stormwater when we're not. That's not really our role. We have zoning regulations about stormwater. We fairly recently passed a very strong stormwater regulation. Perhaps we could add something about our intention behind that. I'm not sure whether that really is going to inform the DRB discussion.
Our intention about.
When we were working on stormwater regulations a couple of years ago. So, I mean, I think the strength of the memo was talking about the map, the official map, because that's what our role was. So.
Nonetheless, as you say, the zoning regulations do address stormwater and make references to stormwater.
And that's what the DRB needs to struggle with, listening to various experts. I don't see that the Planning Commission has a role in that discussion because we've already done our work there. Does anyone have any comments on that?
I agree.
I can understand what you're saying. I still, however, feel as a commissioner, we need to, it would be good to find a way to make sure that we're looking at everything we can look at. We, the DRB, the town, is looking at all the information we have before we make a decision. In this case, it's going to be the DRB who makes that
I'm
decision.
pretty comfortable that they're looking at everything. Honestly, I don't think, I mean, if I thought that we could give them, provide them some nugget of information that would just change everything, I would say let's go for it. But we've already done our work through the regulations,
Okay.
and that's what they're working with now. They're looking at our regulations. They're looking at the plan. That's their job. If there were something, and personally, I didn't do the homework of going back to those stormwater discussions. If there were something we could add about our intention during those discussions, but to be honest, I think the stormwater regulations we passed were quite strong. I mean, stronger than most every other town in the county,
Well,
I
maybe
would
more
say.
importantly, clear and specific, whereas there were some concern expressed by the applicant in the previous review that the official map wasn't, and that they weren't gonna comply with it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when this issue was first raised to them, when they submitted the application, their first response was, well, that's not even a legally enforceable document. Our attorney says we don't even have to comply with that, and we're not going to. To which I said, what are you talking about? It's a duly adopted regulation, has the force of zoning, and our town attorney says it's an enforceable document, at which point they continued to make the argument, it's not specific enough, but we will accommodate through this farmer's market idea. I think that is where what you're talking about better explaining the intention behind a regulation that maybe wasn't as clear as at least the applicant wanted it to be, is helpful, as opposed to trying to explain the intention behind a very clear regulation, like a 10-foot setback or a 75-foot stream setback. There's just no wiggle room in the interpretation of that. It's a measurable, objective thing.
What did the court say about the enforcement, that very question about the official map?
They didn't say anything because the DRB approved the project and none of the appellants
okay.
raised it as an issue, I don't think. Am I wrong, Jim?
That's correct. The Supreme Court didn't address it because we didn't brief that in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And we didn't raise it as a specific issue in the environmental court.
So
So it
it's
was-
still,
It's so.
they said, and we said,
If the current
but we consider
if
it.
the current DRB rejects the project on the basis of the official map,
Mm-hmm.
it'll undoubtedly be part of the litigation on appeal. If the DRB approves it based on, compliance with the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
official map,
Yeah,
some
I get what you're
parties
saying.
might appeal based on that when they didn't the first time. I don't want to speak for them.
But our town attorneys, we still believe the official map is a
Yes.
regulatory document that is based in zoning,
We
okay?
have no change
questions
in
or
opinion
qualms about
from our legal counsel at the town level that this is a enforceable document. I think we have recognition largely on the planning commission that we would like to
Yeah.
update it, make it more specific, improve it. But we still feel it's an enforceable document, should be complied with, and frankly is. Most of the other projects in the village growth area have complied with the official map. Even the Black Rock project, which has one of these large brown community facilities on the property, has said, we will work with that. They reoriented it a bit in their proposal, but it's accommodated.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, while I agree with John's sentiments, I think where this planning commission has really can contribute in a way nobody else can is, as your chair and Alex are both saying, that nobody else is addressing this issue with the authority that you have. In other words, the official map. And so I think that's really where you can contribute in a way that nobody else can contribute. I agree with that point.
Can I ask you an awkward question?
Sure.
You represent John.
Yeah, excuse me, I was gonna say the same thing.
Do you feel like a decision, I mean, I don't want to speak for the commission, but I'm sensing some similar discontent with this official map issue that the previous commission had. If this commission were to issue a similarly strong opinion to the DRB, do you think it would be stronger with John participating as a member of the public, having recused himself, or with John as a voting member of the board?
It's an awkward, but it's a good question. And it seems to me the best resolution would be, John, for you to abstain, to speak your piece and let people decide, and then you abstain from the vote. I think that's the cleanest record, which is, I think, your point.
And I'll just say, I agree with it. I think you're great, John, and I trust you. But
I don't feel personally attacked by it.
okay, good. Because the way I looked at it, and I've had this question is it's kind of to James's point, is it's an opinion, and we all have our opinions and we all have our beliefs. But when does opinion cross into personal interest? And when it's your wife, I trust that you can do that. But when you're in a court case, it gets a little tough. And I think you can, but my worry is perception is reality. And I want to make sure whatever we say to the select board is clear and transparent, and there is no question about any of that. That's all I'm getting at. And I, I'd be okay with you well, I can't tell you what to do, but anyway, that's my 2 cents, you know?
Absolutely respect
That's where I'm
Right.
coming
that
from.
position, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
We need to make the strongest statement we can.
And I just wanted to speak up and say, I didn't mean what I said as a personal attack at
I
you
never took it
at
that
all.
way.
I,
No.
Yeah.
honestly, Jeff said it more eloquently than I did. Whatever we say, I want it to look the best that it can, which Mr. Dumont said that also.
Yeah, if it's
So that's my concern. I'm not passing judgment on
Yeah.
what everybody thinks one way or the other.
I just don't want that to go into the DRB's
Correct.
mind. What am I reading and is it, you know what I mean? I want it to be very, no,
Yep.
this is the planning commission stance. So I want it to have the full weight without question is what I'm getting at.
So, would anyone else like to comment on the memo,
I guess I continue to believe that as the commission that drafted this or, made up this official map, I continue to believe that the lot in question is an ideal centrally located, visible spot for a community facility. And, it certainly doesn't feel to me like that's been adequately addressed. It just feels like Hannaford has just kind of threw something in there to see if they can satisfy that the community facility plan.
Somebody made a comment, and I don't mean to interrupt, somebody made a comment that I thought was interesting, that I was wondering about. I'm glad to see that somebody had commented. I'm trying to find it, but basically the comment was, technically that public space is in the village district. It's not even part of the lot 15 or that area that we said that needs to be a community facility. The community facility is not even on the property. It's not even on the lot. It's part of, it's not lot 15, it's lot whatever, the automotion is on. And what does that mean? And the planning commission did comment on that in one of their other, just trying to find it was one of the comments in here. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. It's not part of lot 15 at all. So does that even meet anything? I don't know, what do you think? The comment that it's not part of
Yeah,
lot 15?
It
I'm
was-
just looking at some of the
It was
notes.
discussed during the DRB review the first time around, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, I can't speak for the current board,
Right.
but I can tell you the previous discussion, I believe they felt, that the majority felt that it was part of the project, it was proposed to be part of the project, and so it passed muster. Legally, whether it requires a revision to the official map, there is a process by which minor revisions can be made to the official map, as a developer makes a proposal. I think it could be argued that that is still required, but the majority of the board felt it was acceptable, even though it was adjacent to. Remember, they are proposing to allow use of the parking area during the farmer's market time. So although it's not an exclusive community use, it's sort of a, as they said in the decision, a unique public partnership in the use of that space.
I wonder if it would be helpful if we took just a little poll to see who would be interested in forwarding a memo to the DRB.
So who would, or?
Who would be? Okay, so let's talk about how, are there any other, we've talked about adding a paragraph on that easement, is that what we talked about?
So this was going to be a new document, not an add-on to this one?
Well-
I'm not clear on what you're saying.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. I think there are some very strong parts of this memo that I'd like to keep, and there are members of the DRB who haven't, I assume, haven't seen it. Maybe they've gone through everything, but no.
The
So
3 new members haven't.
yeah, so I mean, I'd like to hear your comments, but I'm personally in favor of keeping a large portion of this. And maybe adding a bit about that, the easement, the fact that we no longer have a farmer's market. Don't see one on the horizon.
But was, another question.
Yeah.
So was that little parcel of land that's not part of lot 15, losing my train of thought now. That wasn't anything to do with the existing farmer's market, was it, actually? The one that existed at the time, that used to be at the church?
This?
Right, well, you just was an assumption that was gonna move over there? I wasn't involved at that time.
There was
so I don't-
discussion at the time about the fact that the Lions Club was operating a farmer's market at the church, and whether that farmer's market would relocate to this site that Hannaford was proposing, or whether it might be, by the time Hannaford was constructed, some other farmer's market. Farmers markets were a big,
I know, and
a
they've
bigger
whittled
deal,
down
and in
a
many
little.
communities, they've diminished in the
Yeah.
last 10 years.
Yeah,
So in Williston, for example, they had two for some time. I don't
Right.
know that was what was gonna happen here, but I don't think it was clear
Okay.
which entity was gonna run a farmer's market here. And of course, Hannaford has no power over that. They were just saying, we'll provide the space for it, whoever wants to operate
could
it.
do it.
And the town will have an easement for that to be possible.
But it also says they can, so if you follow that logic on that, number 3 on the official map, right, town green, community center, fire police, farmer's market, parks and recreation area. Is that a park and recreation area? You know? I would say not. I just,
Right, I think your argument is
Yeah,
that it's a poor site for a public use, period.
yeah.
But if the board thought it was viable as a unique public-private partnership for a farmer's market, and we don't have a farmer's market, then no other public use could really happen there. That would make sense.
What size is it, Alex? What are the dimensions of it?
I want to say that we could scale it. I want to say that the additional property, where's the pointer, was 0.32 acres.
A third of an acre?
Yeah, but that's the whole addition, and there's a pretty steep slope, as you can see. That's what these contour lines are. So the usable area, sort of flat, grassy pad, is maybe 2/3 of that or half of that.
Interestingly enough, that very drawing, this is one of the application drawings,
Yes,
shows that whole flat area covered with a tree grove. That's what that jiggly line that's defines a rectangle indicates. That's how architects, landscape architects,
I think
civil engineers illustrate trees.
I think in this case, actually, John, they're using that to indicate snow storage. Because I think
Oh,
if I
okay, right, it does say
zoom,
snow storage in the middle.
if I zoom over here where they have
Yep,
more snow
yep, they
storage,
use
they
the
use
same
that same
symbol.
symbology.
Yeah,
And that Jeff mentioned that, like, wait a minute, that's going to be a big pile of snow.
right,
so
right,
it's-
right,
How are
right.
you gonna, so the other one shows.
But the other one does show
3 or 4
some
trees
trees,
right there, but
which
how-
are, that
how is
also
this-
was part of the application, the
Yeah,
other drawing you
yeah, they
showed us.
proposed to plant trees there.
So-
I don't know how you plow that snow when you have mature trees there.
It also says on the bottom that the
There's the
.32 acre parcel is to be conveyed from the Giroux Trust to lot 15.
Correct.
So is that a boundary adjustment?
Yes, and so part of the
So it is part of lot
I mean,
15.
does it fit the description of what we allow for a boundary adjustment?
no, actually, it's a subdivision revision
that was
because
my next
because
question.
these were part of multiple subdivisions. And yes, you're laughing because of the select board meeting on Monday, but nobody else was there. So
I'm sorry.
in any case, yeah, the DRB decision in 2012 had conditions that said, Hannaford, this approval is contingent on you adding this property in through another approval, which has to go through a separate process, along with revisions to a couple other properties, including the Aubuchon site where the access to the Aubuchon Plaza had to be moved to the east. And they came back for those approvals and got denied, actually. The story's complicated with this project. The DRB denied them on most of those requests for various technical reasons. And those denials were overturned by the environmental court.
You can actually see a new property line at the toe of that sloping
Yeah, exactly, the
thing.
toe of
So
that fairly
it's-
steep
It's saying
bank.
this is a new property line.
Okay, let's focus, people.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
I'm trying to picture what this piece of property looks like, and from what I understand, Hannaford's has to fill Lot 15 to build up, which means this is going to be lower, and I think it's wet in that area.
It's gonna be raised.
Yeah,
That's what those contour lines are showing.
Okay.
It's a slope going up.
Through the sliding hill?
John's right on the money. They're gonna fill this area too.
No.
Originally,
Into the
all the lots in Commerce Park were to be filled. And the one where Dark Star is, for some reason, where the first construction happened, was never filled. So they are lower. But that was part of the old original plan, was to fill all of each lot as it got developed.
So what does that do? Bring it up to the height of like the bank and everything?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's been
essentially.
filled. And all the other lots have.
Think of the road as it comes into the bank. That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
level
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah. No,
that the Hannaford site will sort of
I
be
get it.
on.
Yeah, no, I
And if
think
you
about
look
it.
at the back of the bank property, it's a pretty
Correct.
steep
Yeah.
drop off. They brought 5 feet or so of fill, and Hannaford will do the same. Although it's not an even 5 feet across the whole property, there's a little less as you get towards the canal. I think there's maybe only 18 inches of fill on that side, but on this side, it's very significant. Well, you can see I think you can see, these are existing contours, 337, and this is a proposed contour at 342. So that's, can I do the math? Is that just 5 feet? Yeah, 5 feet,
5 feet.
5 feet up?
5 feet up,
So you're
on
gonna be
this side of the project.
So you're gonna be walking on the canal?
No, this is not the
This
canal
is-
side.
No, I know.
This is in the
On the
corner.
canal side, they're only raising about 18 inches, I believe.
Oh, okay. Because I was like 5
Yeah,
feet.
look at the
and then-
contours on the canal side.
Yeah, we
Alex.
can
You
scroll
have
over
them
there.
right there.
Okay, people, seriously.
Yeah, sorry.
I wanna focus this,
Because we're already 20 minutes over and we need to get to village standards. So if we could look at the memo and see how or if people want to make changes to it. Ideally, we would get to a vote.
What I would
Handle this?
recommend is talk about it a little bit more, eventually cut it off, because we gotta get to this other item. Dennis is
do.
waiting in the clerk's office. And just give me guidance as to what you want in the letter. I'll write it. You can review it at your May 23rd meeting, and then you can submit it to the DRB. They're not gonna talk about all of this project at their next meeting. They're talking principally about traffic and compatibility of the landscaping
okay.
and architecture with the site. They'll be talking about official map and all the other site plan requirements in June.
Okay. So does anyone have any other specific suggestions to add?
I
To
think
them?
we should make a comment about the easement and the fact that, this is being designated as a farmer's market, and if it's not used within 5 years, we lose that easement. And
And that
we have
no.
nobody going in for a
farmer's
farmer's market.
Can you do that in a
That's-
paragraph?
Oh, yeah.
That's different than, the other things I think kind of fit to what I'm saying. Maybe I'd like to see some specificity where I say, you can't, there is no connection other than through a parking lot and where it's
Think about
located.
Jeff's comment about the sort of inadequacy of the space for a public community use.
But I'm still confused. That's not what it says on the map. It says it's going to be added to lot 15, not an easement.
So it will be added to lot 15, so Hannaford will own it,
Right.
and then Hannaford will give the town an easement over that portion that they now own.
Oh, I
Where
understand.
we use it.
I understand.
won't-
Sorry.
We will not have an easement over the rest of lot 15,
Got
but
it.
we will have an easement over this chunk.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Easement disappears and it's not used.
Yes,
Right.
I did get that part.
Well, I like the connection language, especially in terms of the green space language, the standards that we haven't quite written yet, if we could get to them. But, were you able to find anything in there? Is that what you were looking for?
I was going through the town, because I forget where we have that talks about the official map, and we talk about, because the official map talks about the trails and the interconnectivity and green space and what we're looking for, and I
Yeah.
just don't see it there, and I think that should be highlighted. And I know they said a little bit about that, it doesn't fit the official map, but that's I'm one person, but that's my reason why I don't think it fits as something for community use, because it's just going to end up being a snow storage and then a patch of grass. And if a farmer's market even were to show up in 5 years, I still don't think behind a building by a truck lot and dumpsters in a parking lot and a salvage yard is where the most welcoming space for any type of public space. That's my concern. So they can get creative and move things around and readdress this concern. But that's my concern with this plan as proposed, is just
Right.
the
If they're-
location
If they're
and
gonna
the,
accommodate the
Yeah.
official map,
Yeah.
but this piece of infrastructure, it's in the wrong space on this lot.
It
It should be
doesn't
moved
meet-
to a different location on the lot that is.
It might be
More
better.
connected, more aesthetically pleasing, more likely to be used by the community.
Is there, language in the town plan around connectivity?
I'll find
and that?
whatever I can.
Awesome.
And it'll be in the memo, yes.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what I'll be able to latch onto, but I will look hard and fast.
it's more about that goal and vision. Because I know somewhere we always talk about that is interconnectivity and green space and open
Right.
space and
Yeah,
So-
I think it's a commonly cited
Yeah,
desire.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
just finding the right reference in the plan and pointing to it.
right. Thank you.
Is this something we're going to vote on right now, saying,
No,
Alex, do this, or we'll
No.
vote on it when
yeah,
it comes back?
yeah, when it comes back. Any other comments? On that?
What if the DRB makes a decision before that?
They won't. So they're talking
Okay.
about it again on May 15th, and they will talk again at their first meeting in June.
Oh, okay.
And they're not going to close the hearing until that first meeting in June at the earliest. It may take longer than that. So if you can wrap this up by your May 23rd meeting, you will be able to get them input in time.
Excellent.
You do have some members of the public
Any
here.
other comments from the patient
Well-
public?
I'm wanting to regress all the way back to the beginning of this meeting when you talked about elevations of the building. And what I don't quite get is you add 7 feet of sill, you put a building on top of that that is 26 feet high. How does that building relate to the post office and all of the other buildings? Will it be, head and shoulders above everybody else? Will it look like?
I think it will look, from a first floor elevation standpoint, it will be very similar to the National Bank of Middlebury, which also was brought up,
Yeah,
but it's a vastly larger building. And it's not designed to have that sort of pitched roof
Right.
look that
Right.
the bank has. So, I mean, I think that's the best I can say about it, is that it's on the same plane to begin with.
okay.
But the massing of the building
Is huge.
is a lot. There's no other building in Commerce Park that
No.
is even close.
Right. So you'll probably be able to see it from 116.
That's a good question, Johanna. I'm not sure that you will. I don't think you will, except perhaps that portion just north of NRG on 116 where you're high enough up that you're looking down into
Right.
Commerce Park.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be able to see it from there.
Yeah, or from Thistle Hill.
Well, yes, and certainly from Thistle Hill, but from other public, from the section of 116 where the Giroux auto body is and all that, I think it'll largely be screened. You'll know there's a building back there, but I'm not sure it'll be hugely evident. Certainly from the canal path yeah, it's gonna be extremely visible, and from Mechanicsville Road and Commerce Street. And, yeah, Thistle Hill.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, also during the hearings, they sort of referred to the strip of grass alongside the canal path as kind of a linear park or something. And I would just encourage commissioners to, if you don't walk along there, to look for the stake that's closest. It's really close. I mean, I don't think it would meet any description of a park space. And also, I believe it's planned to kind of go like this. So you've got the sidewalk, and then it's gonna dip down, right, Alex? Isn't that what the plans kind of show? That it'll dip down and then kind of go up again? So I don't know if that would fit in the verbiage of the letter, or if you wanted to consider that. But there were attempts to make that also be described as a park area, the strip in between the store.
Yeah,
and-
Catherine's referring to this area here, and maybe, into this little area that they described as a pocket park. And this is an area that there is wetland, a remnant patch of wetland that they're not impacting. Well, maybe that's not the right word. They're not filling. And so, to Catherine's point, if you read the DRB decision from 2012, they make it a very specific conclusion that the proposal for this linear park in no way satisfies the official map and in no way is a usable space, because it's low-lying, it's remnant wetland, there's, slopes leading up to the parking area, and so while, the landscaping was deemed appropriate, the consideration of this as some sort of public space was not deemed to be accurate or not agreed to. And if you're amenable, you could throw that in with reference to the prior DRB decision. We're doing a lot of that in our staff reports that we're writing for this project, is saying this is similar to what was reviewed originally, or what have you.
I think it would be helpful to include that as part of the mix, yeah.
Yeah, may I just to reinforce what you said already, as much as we all have lots to say on lots of the criteria where the planning commission can really weigh in the way that nobody else will, is on the issues you're now talking about, the official map.
Good, so we'll have something to look at our next meeting. Yeah, and
I'll draft you up a memo.
some,
Can I just, one more question, and then I'll stop. So when they talked about this in 2011, right? So the planning commission talked about it in 2010, then they came back in 2011 to look at it again and talk about it. Was this the plan they were talking about?
For the most part, the one thing that changed was this area of the site.
Okay.
The swale got moved, and so there's a little bit of change to the parking area, but
But
it's largely
the
the
spots
same.
that we've been discussing tonight.
Oh, yeah,
Those
there's-
are all there, okay.
Those are all the same.
Okay, thanks.
Can I go get Dennis?
yes,
Okay.
he's still here. Poor guy, snoozing in the back room.
One more thing. Go back out.
I didn't see him
Put your fingers in your ears. I in no way thought you were saying anything but say that word. You have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and feedback.
Thanks. After, we can talk for a minute, yes.
Bye, Joe.
We're glad you're still there.
We've missed you so much. What were you doing in there? Playing Candy Crush?
Sleeping.
Sleeping.
Back there with the glass.
It's the wall.
You're looking for something or
Watching the
selling
live
something?
stream on VCAM.
Right, you can always live stream.
What?
You can always look at it.
For? Okay. All right. So, let's see. So on to village area standards. Alex has given us the first draft of our green space language.
Anybody need a hard copy? No? All right. In case it helps you follow.
In the Dropbox, that's in 2018?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So first, apologies to John. He's been very good about encouraging us to always have maps up, and I did not finish the map. I said I would for this meeting, so I apologize for that.
Important stuff.
But you do have in front of you a very, just a first draft of a series of public open space standards. And I think in my email with the packet, I gave you a couple of rumblings or questions that were running through my mind on this, but I'm more interested in just hearing your feedback on whether these particular standards kind of capture what you were talking about, or if you're confused by any of them, or have ideas for other ones.
I like the size and location chart. It gives a little clarity as to what the expectation is as to, based on the size of the development, how much we expect.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's public open space. But yeah,
Did you find some suggestions in other sources that you were looking at, Alex, about these 10 to 25, 60,000, 6,000, 8,000?
I didn't. South Burlington has the most specific standards on this front, and they base it on a per unit basis, the number of dwelling units, it's a number of square feet per dwelling unit, and a number of square feet of public open space per square footage of non-residential space. So this is more categorical. So if you're in this category, you have to have this much open space. Theirs is more incremental, like for each dwelling unit, it ratchets up a little bit. Their requirements are, so first of all, caveat, I don't have a whole lot of, I'm not married to these numbers. It's just a place to start the conversation.
Yeah.
I based it on looking at existing green spaces, kind of what you had us doing, and seeing what the size of those green spaces were based on how many dwelling units were part of the development that created them. And so, for example, the little sliver of green space behind the Bristol Bakery that we had a lot of fun sort of tearing apart at the other meeting, is about, if I remember right, 4,000 square feet, I think.
Really?
Yeah, and it's a little hard to get an exact measurement because do you include the sidewalk or is it just the green space? Whereas if you can imagine the green space on the corner of Farmall Drive and 116, but on the town property, just north of the EFG building, there's sort of a green patch there that the town decided to hold on to. And if you think of that as sort of a square and not connected to the rest of the larger green space behind the police station, that's about 8,000 square feet. Also took a look at the various green spaces within the Creekside neighborhood, within the Thistle Hill neighborhood, and based on that, this kind of minimum public open space is what I came up with based on looking at those various sizes. South Burlington's regulations, not anywhere near this much open space, probably a tenth of the amount of required open space, public open space that this talks about. And furthermore, their regulation for their city center, this is for their city center form-based code area, so it's their most developed area that they're trying to do a lot of stuff in. It's not like the Hinesburg Village, so it's not an apples to apples comparison. So much less open space required in their city center form-based code, but also not all of it has to be accessible to or has to be in the public realm for them. In fact, for most of their residential development, the open space doesn't have to be in the public realm. This is, the way this is drafted, it is in the public realm. So that's another sort of overarching question you should be thinking about, is that, hey, Alex drafted this first draft and it's all about public open space available to the general public use. You know, what do we think about private open space, and does it always have to be open to public use, and so on and so forth. But to answer, that's a very long-winded answer to your question, John. South Burlington was the only one I found that had specific numbers, and they result in just a fraction of the open space that this is proposing to require.
They were the one that had the incremental
Yeah.
adjustments,
Yeah.
okay.
One specific thing I wanted to ask about that chart was the large green space in the proposed Black Rock plan, whatever the latest is. Do you happen to have, or would you be able to do your little,
How big, to figure out how big it would be?
yeah, compared to the number of dwelling units? I mean, I would expect it to be at least 20,000, and I'm thinking it probably,
It's far in
Yes.
excess of that.
Okay.
My recollection is that on the official map, that brown blob is supposed to be about 2.5 acres, which would be about 100,000 square feet. And what they've shown is about that. So it's a much larger area than this would require. But, and so I thought about that, and I thought, well, maybe if for the largest developments, it should be that big, but the idea, the way this is drafted, and this is addressed in the applicability paragraph. Sorry, I'll show that on screen. I will try to show that on screen. This regulation, the way it's drafted, says that that you have a requirement to provide this public open space if you meet these triggers, and that although the provision of this public open space is encouraged to coincide with the official map elements, it doesn't have to be. So my thought is that if you have a large official map element on your property, like BlackRock's proposal does, you got to accommodate that. But you may also want to include public open space in other places, and if so, it should meet these other design standards. But you may meet the minimum requirement just by satisfying what the town said was a very large open space area. In other projects, for example, the Quinn property on the east side of Mechanicsville Road, that we don't have an official map element shown there. It has a huge development potential, 160 plus units of development possible there. And so they would be held to, in this table, 40,000 square feet, so an acre of open space. And
Just as a-
which in that case could be forested
But
space.
that's not,
yeah,
that's not necessarily continuous. It's
Contigu-
not just one
contiguous.
thing. It
Doesn't
can be
have-
sprinkled around.
this,
and you could have
you're right, this
parts all over.
doesn't specify whether it's one block or multiple. That's true. And that's something we could talk about.
One thing just for us to know, right now, if you look at Lot 1 and you take out the area that would go to parking on the south side of the road that now goes through from 116 to Farmall, everything south of that is parking. If you measure the rest of the land, it's about 1.25 acres. There's a big section in the middle, and then there's some little jogs and bumps off of it. And I checked it all, measured it with what Alex does with the little lines that show you how long sides of the lot are. And it's about 1.25 acres. So that to me gives me a sense of how big is Lot 1 and who does it serve?
Yeah, and I tried to look at the fact that that development back there on the Lyman property has happened in phases. So the Creekside development was the first, that's 37 dwelling units. Then the area around Kinney Drugs and Bristol Bakery, that's 18 additional dwelling units. So now we're up to, help me with the math, 55.
55.
And the last phase of the project is proposed for, I believe, 60 or so dwelling units. So
So
we're getting up to.
doubling what is there currently.
Yes, because one way they're doing that is they're proposing a single multifamily, apartment style building with, I think, 20 units in it, which we don't have.
As part of their
As
product,
one of the
one
buildings
of the
in their future build out. In any case, that pushes the overall number of dwelling units up over about 110, 111, which would put them in the highest category here. And I say that because Lot 1 really was part of that project. It was given to the town, it was set aside as open space.
And the developer of this phase that is about to happen or will happen next actually wanted to give some money to
Right.
improve Lot 1 as a
Way to get a bonus
as
for more
wanting
units.
a bonus, but again, a focus on making that a park for that neighborhood seemed to be a good idea in everybody's mind.
So one thing I think would be good for us to talk about is, I was just thinking about it, looking at it, is, okay, well, you've got dwelling units and numbers, and you've got non-residential square feet. So some of these large developments, like Black Rock, which one wins? So let's say it's got 8,000 square feet of non-residential, but they're putting in 100 residential units. Do they have to do
one do
15,000 or
you measure?
25,000?
Yeah.
So the note number 3 below the table,
Okay.
which you can't see on screen, but I'll pull it up here and get rid of this warning.
Oh, okay, I see.
Note
The
number
higher
3
amount.
addresses that. It would be,
Okay,
it would be whatever the higher amount
Yeah.
is. It wouldn't be cumulative, so you wouldn't tag them twice.
Yeah.
You wouldn't add them up,
But
but
that
you
was
would,
what I was
you would
thinking.
take the larger of
Take
the
which
two.
one,
Yeah.
either higher or lower of the two. Okay. I didn't see the little 3 there.
So I'll be honest with you, when I did what John did, which is, I can show you on screen here, if this computer will behave itself. Hold on.
Yeah, I actually did a little more jigging and jogging behind the new
It's hard 'cause you
renovated
got
police
that road-
station.
that road
And there's a
there.
tree there.
So there's, there's that little silver space behind Kinney Drugs that we like to talk about. There's the space that I was referring to, sort of on the corner next to EFG. There's that larger space that John was talking about. Here's actually another space that, if the developer's plan for the final phase, will also become a green space area.
But,
But not a I mean,
He's not proposing it to be public.
not to be public,
it-
and that's,
it-
and it would be very awkward in people's backyards to be.
Potentially, yeah. It might be very good as just a neighborhood space. But then here's an additional green space that was created sliver-like in the original development of Creekside. Here's the stormwater pond area at the bottom of Thistle Hill that was designed with a walking path around it and was supposed to be landscaped to be an aesthetically pleasing feature, not just a single-purpose, we store stormwater kind of a hole in the ground.
They do mow it so you can walk around.
Yeah. And I
That's how it
just looked
ended
at the
up.
size of all those, and that's what I was basing some of this on. I will tell you that when you look at the overall project for the Lyman property, which is 37 units of Creekside, 18 units here, plus approximately,
Say 60 in the next phase?
well, yes, but non-residential space in
Oh,
this
not-
pod
yeah.
equals Kinney Drugs at 11,000, Bristol Bakery at 3, D Physical Therapy at 3. So,
the new one?
and the new one at another 3 with 3 spaces in there. So that's 20,000 square feet of non-residential space.
Non-residential.
So this final phase would add, 60 plus units of residential and another 13,000 square feet of non-residential space. All told, that's like 111 or 120 residential units and whatever the math comes out to, 33,000 square feet of non-residential space. In
There's
this
more?
table, there is more, yeah. In this table, that would be the max of public space requirement of 40,000 square feet. But in reality, this project's gonna provide a lot more than that. So part of me looked at that and said, well, then the largest category should be like 80,000 square feet,
but
but
take out how much is not
public, true.
so.
True.
I also have some really bad news. It looks like we've been talking about like a children's play park behind the fire station, and
Yeah.
it's been attacked by giant ladybugs. So I just thought I'd point that out.
Was that a complete non sequitur, or were we all supposed to be?
That's a bug on.
Oh, that right there, I see.
Well, should we add a different?
It's May, Maggie, that's a black fly.
I can't tell.
Not a
I can't
tick,
tell what
is
it
it?
is.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, it's way too big for
Yeah.
a deer.
I mean, do we need to do one larger?
Maybe.
Like, you know, 200 plus?
I'm not sure that you're going. There's a lot of value in
Yeah, we don't
and as a group
need
trying to work through this table and figure it out. I think it'd be better for you to think on it
Yeah.
and then talk about it at the next meeting. I think it'll be easier for you to talk about the language of, okay, there's a section on applicability. Are the triggers right? Did Alex set the triggers at the right level? Or there's a section on location, like where do these things have to be? Is that verbiage, does that make sense? Does that capture our conversation? There's a section on features and amenities. Did that capture everything we wanted these places to have?
So a question I have, does the green space have to go with the phasing? So like, you know, you've got Hinesburg, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
Does there have to be
You know, I
green
could see them
space in
saying-
each phase?
Yeah, or, because I could see him saying, here's my plan of all 3 phases, and I don't meet it until phase 3. So phase 1, you've got nothing. Phase 2, that's, you know, do we need to say, no, the green space has to be built into the phasing? But then I could see that being complicated from a
That's kind of-
developer standpoint
Yeah,
too.
very
I mean,
complicated.
because I don't want to discourage development either, but you know what I mean? I also don't want to get caught out where it's,
No, I
You
think,
know?
well, it's because, same as with a master plan, we want to see the master plan, we want to see the master green space plan, since connectivity is a part of it.
But I think Dennis has raised the point at the DRB level, or maybe here actually, maybe both, that with projects that are phased, there's no guarantee that the future phases are ever going to happen.
that's where I'm getting.
So I think Jeff has a good point that if the project has a substantive phase, you know, we're not talking about, well, I'm going to put in a single building, you know, it's hard to do a lot of green space around that. If there's a substantive phase, why not require this open space in proportion to how much development is proposed in that phase? It will allow that to be then potentially distributed across the
Yeah.
phases and maybe be more interesting, or it could be a part of a larger single, you know, green space, but they're gonna at least develop a portion of it.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah. That was what I didn't want us to get caught out where
Yeah,
you just have a
I agree, the way
half-built.
this is drafted, it doesn't speak to that at all, so it would be at the discretion of the DRB, and maybe you wanna spell that out so it's
Yeah.
clearer for them.
So you may only get halfway through the green space amount that you want if
the whole plan, like I'm thinking
Right.
of BlackRock, right? So you look
Right.
at the whole thing, like, yeah, that's great. Well, because of whatever things, they're like, well, now we got to phase it. So really, we're just going to start here, but you don't know if it's going to go further. So does that have enough? If that's it, does
Right.
that have enough green space to meet what we
Right.
want?
Does your master
community?
plan include green
Right.
space in that area?
Or at least you have to think about green space and your phasing plan in the entire scope of what you're presenting.
The
So-
South Burlington City Center form-based code that has this public open space or open space requirement does have some language about off-site open space and mitigation. And so it's not in this draft, but I think that I want to run this by our attorney at some point to make sure that that this doesn't turn into a constitutionally problematic takings issue where somebody is denied the ability to develop their property because they can't or they're not willing to give the town access to their property, and that there might be a way to get out of that. I don't think that's an ideal solution, and I think in South Burlington's case, they make it clear that that's sort of a last option. But I think, for example, about the BlackRock plan, it feels weird to talk about the specific project, but the first phase that they're thinking of doing, which we've encouraged them to do as a first phase, is the southern tier of the project adjacent to the Hinesburg Center project, just on the north side of Patrick Brook. And the bulk of their green space is not in that phase, but the phase is going to connect to the rec fields and provide infrastructure to get to the rec fields.
Pathways, you're saying?
Roads and pathways, sidewalks, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they might be able to make the case that, listen, we've got a great green space plan. It's gonna be in a future phase. We understand you know, if the future phases don't happen, you don't want this project to not be an attractive project, but it is attractive because of this adjacent, you know, green space, and maybe we can contribute to the improvement of that or add on to it in a way that, you know, makes it more viable or what have you.
They
So-
could make that argument or make that presentation to the DRB, and we could leave it for the DRB to decide whether or not that
Yeah.
met the requirements for recreation, open space, however we
Well,
define it.
let me in version 2 work on Jeff's suggestion about the phased approach to the green space and see if I can't work some language that tries to give guidance but allows some flexibility.
A little flexibility, yeah, because that's what I've been thinking about, if they're going up this way, they haven't, you know, if they're going from south to north, and that large space is in it's a center section.
Yeah, it wouldn't be till
Yeah.
phase 2 or 3.
But you could also say they got a ton of open space, right? Because I've done phase 1 and I still have this big open agricultural field that I haven't filled in yet. And which is true. I mean, it is open green space. So, I don't know. It's a fine line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's clear from the features and amenities section of this, and hopefully the rest of it, that the type of public open space and amenities that we're looking for, it's not just an ag field. Like, that doesn't cut the mustard.
Right.
You know, we're looking for a place where people can actively be, and it will become a magnet for people to want to be there. So, yeah, in that case, somebody saying, well, I'll just leave that field open, and if I ever get there, I'll turn it into something, but for now, people will be able to look at it. That wouldn't qualify as open space, public open space. We'd want them to actually create something there.
Yeah, but it is tough because I could see somebody with a large plan saying, you know, I got this great, gigantic green space that's going to be, you know, Central Park of Hinesburg or whatever, you know what I mean? And then okay, well, now I'm forced to phase, so I've got to force, so I'll do my 3 steps, but you're going to lose that big because I've got to now spread that out. So
Right.
you end up with a bunch of pocket parks or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
So
what
it's
I'm
that that's what I'm
concerned
saying.
about,
It's
too.
a fine balance of
Right,
how do you do that? I don't know. That's a tough one.
yeah.
Well, I think it's a good point. Let me try to draft some language for the next version that speaks to that.
But do you think all the green space in the residential needs to be open to the public?
Yeah, so that's another overarching question. The way this is drafted, it's only speaking to public open space. Private open space is perfectly acceptable as well, but we don't, this regulation doesn't compel it, doesn't require it. It only requires the publicly accessible piece of open space. I think some private open space does make sense, and we see it frequently.
For example, please.
Well, so
Creekside.
Creekside has this space here, which is just open to the neighborhood, not the general public. It also has this space, which is really nothing, but it is just private, open to just their neighborhood.
But it's like what you said before or Jeff brought out about the field. We could say this is, nothing's being done there at either one of
No,
those.
the northern one is just so wet that it
Yeah.
can't be used at the moment.
This one actually does have tree plantings, and although it has wetness issues, especially after rains and when it ponds, the neighborhood does actively use it when it's not, when it is drier. This space, I don't think so much, because
thought that was a backyard.
it's so in between. It feels like just a backyard. Then there's the Thistle Hill stormwater pond, sort of bottom of the project. That's technically not accessible to the public, although I can't imagine anybody from the development would care if a kid came up and looked for frogs, you know.
That's pretty much what it's used for.
Yeah.
Kids are down there.
But
grabbing
technically,
frogs
it's
and
privately owned. Whereas, for example, the trail system on the privately owned open space back here in the development, the land is private, but the trails were conveyed to the town and therefore are accessible to the public. So it's a blend on this larger chunk of open space back here. So I think Dennis, you could have both. I'm not sure, I'd be interested to hear from you whether you want our green space design standards to speak to both, or only, as this draft does, speak to what would be available to the general public.
Are you thinking that there might be some compensation if a developer provides within the development private space that would belong to the residents? And then also say, but if, I guess maybe there would never be a case where there wasn't some private open space around buildings. It's not, we're not talking
Well, like
about
Thistle Hill, there's really not
downtown.
much.
There's not much, but it's
know what I
not
mean?
downtown Burlington where there's no outdoor space except on the roof.
In Thistle Hill, you mean the private green space?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is. There's a whole,
Where?
if you see that funny little triangle thing, here, I can show you.
Point that out to us.
Right, but I mean, right around the
That little
houses is
Oh,
what he was
Weird
yeah.
shape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this funny
Yeah.
thing, that's all wooded area, and I know the kids that all live around here play in
like
that,
it?
and then this extends down to
Yeah,
here,
it
it's all
goes down
private.
through there.
There's not much down here, it's a lot of,
No.
you can't really use it.
But that
this is
shouldn't
used
go
by the
toward the
town.
calculation though?
And that's private?
But that's private, owned by just a
The
small subset
association.
of houses. It's not
Right.
actually Thistle Hill, it's owned by these original houses here.
Right,
as
it's
part of the
part of
HOA.
that
Yeah,
original.
if I could steal that back from you, the real private open space in this development was the stormwater pond area
Yeah,
and this much larger chunk of land
Yeah.
back here.
right.
So all of this is available for the residents here to go run around in and chase squirrels and do whatever they want. And there are public trails that go through it, 3 trails.
And connect.
And they connect with other trees.
Yeah, and connect with the Russell property and
go to
Levine Hill
other
Road.
trails
But the private portion of it is everything around the trails. So, if I went to hike there, I would be legally allowed to hike on the trail. If the kid who lives in this house wants to go up here and build a tree house or, build a fort off the trail someplace, she can do that, but I can't because I don't live there. So it is private open space in that sense. But you're right, Dennis, there isn't much in Thistle Hill with regard to sort of private open space that meets the features and amenities that we talk about for this public open space, with benches and flat usable space and,
But does
that sort of thing.
Is that covered in like yard size and envelope and all that stuff, or that?
But in
That's
this
not
development,
considered.
the private space would have had to been public. If we went by, they would have had to taken a chunk out of the woods or something to meet it.
Yes, it's a good point. So if this had,
Oh, I
if this
see
had
what
been
you're saying, yeah.
reviewed with these regulations, there are, let's see, how many units were there in this? We could count them, but I think there
Guess
were,
at 30, say.
yeah, I wanna say there was 30, something similar to the first phase at Creekside, 37, 38 units. Because they all turned out to be single family except for a
36 or
couple of
7, I
duplex.
think it is.
So they would be in the category of,
15.
15,000 square feet of public open space. And I don't know if the DRB or you would think of that stormwater pond as being, being able to count towards that. But that stormwater pond
Didn't you say-
landscaped area is 23,000 square feet. So if it was counted, they could have made their public open space requirement just with that.
There's something that says you can't include the ponds. Somewhere I read
Yeah,
that.
I think, where did we put it in here?
Infrastructure, not as open space.
Yeah.
The last paragraph, Barb, on the page 2 says that stormwater infrastructure shall be designed to be functional, visually interesting. Stormwater ponds shall be integrated as landscape features rather than single-purpose flood control, blah, blah, blah. I think,
On page 1, it says it cannot count toward the minimum public open space.
Okay.
I think, if that's what it's saying.
Following areas shall not count. Roads,
No, it's just the opposite.
Oh,
It-
wildlife habitat,
In- in
stormwater
the-
treatment
in the
can
second,
count.
yeah, in the second sentence of that last paragraph on page 1, it says, these spaces may simultaneously serve other compatible uses if properly designed, for example, wildlife habitat or stormwater treatment. It goes on to say what can't count, and that is roads, access drives, parking areas, sidewalks, bike lanes along adjacent roads, because we expect those anyways, utility infrastructure, solar installation, so on and so forth. But yeah, a stormwater treatment area that's well-designed could count. And all I'm saying is that in this case, Dennis, if it did count, this property could have met this requirement just with that for public open space. This could all have remained
Have
private.
to do anything about trails.
No.
Maybe the trails never counted anyway.
Yeah, you know, there wasn't a fixed, public open space requirement when this development was done. There was a green space or open space requirement, and it was tied to the percentage of area of the lot. And that's why they designated all of
All
this
of that
as
just
privately owned open space.
as
And
one
then
big piece.
they felt like adding public trails within it was a net positive for the review process. It made everybody feel warm and fuzzy. Frankly, it's I think a major benefit to the neighborhood. It's a selling point, you know,
Yeah.
that
Sure.
that they have connecting trails with adjacent public trails on the Russell Donegan
Yeah,
property
yeah,
and the
yeah.
like. But you're right, they wouldn't have had to have done that under this proposed language.
Do the residents share the tax burden on that?
There's no
Marie,
tax
help.
burden. There's no tax burden on any of the community associations now in our town because we feel that the value is intrinsic in each lot. It truly is. So, yeah, they're benefiting from it, but they're not
There's
paying
not a
taxes
specific
on it.
assessment related to
No,
it.
correct.
But your assessment of each of those properties
Takes into
account that they have an amenity
Right
that they
there.
share, and that boosts their
Exactly.
value in some way.
Does.
Yeah.
But it's a little more esoteric, right? There
Yes,
isn't a
right.
line
How you
item
get out
for
that-
it.
How you get that
No.
value.
We've taken
Yeah.
all of them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through this last reappraisal.
So it's a good point because when you read this and it says not only the water, but you know it could serve wildlife habitat. That little square meets both of those. There's frogs and rats and all sorts of great things in there.
Is there already water there? Is there water there?
Yeah, it's a wet pond. It's designed to always have water in it.
Really?
There are
I'll have to
muskrats
check that
in there,
out.
Muskrats. I'll change
Road trip.
the tone.
I would argue as a former wildlife person in another
drive by
career
it all the
that
time,
you would be hard pressed to call that
True
true wildlife habitat.
It's not, but you could make the argument.
You could definitely argue
You're
that
not talking about the wooded part, you're talking about.
talking
the
about the
stormwater
stormwater.
pond,
You're
yeah.
talking
It's
about
got
the.
reeds and it's got frogs.
Yeah,
it does
yeah.
have
I
right.
think they'd have a better argument that it was sufficiently landscaped and
Yeah, it looks
graded
nice.
to be accessible and serve multiple functions, as opposed to, for example, the stormwater pond behind the Hinesburg Family Health or the UVM Medical Facility,
Not very dry.
which has a fence around it to keep
Right,
you out of
fence,
it. It also has landscaping around it because the DRB wanted it to be not to be an eyesore, but it's not designed to have any other use than stormwater, whereas this
very
one
unattractive.
is. Anyway,
Very-
that question, Dennis, about
very
whether we should have
unattractive.
private open
It's a
space
shame.
standards as well is a good one. And whether, those private spaces could supplant or be sufficient is another good question. I was of the mind that you wanted these to be publicly accessible, areas that were magnets for the community and drew people in, and private spaces just can't do that unless, it's a restaurant, patio and people are invited to be there as patrons.
Well, I think, as a community issue, it both draws the neighborhoods into the community and draws the community into the neighborhoods, as opposed to these, having open, public green spaces, so.
So Maggie, I will just remind you that it is 9:30-ish.
It is 9:30-ish.
What do you want to do?
Well, what are we looking, I'm just trying to get in my head. So, for our meeting of the 23rd, we're gonna look at what you have for the memo.
For Hannaford.
Yeah. Ideally, we all read that and come in with whatever suggestions
you
and
wanna
can
make.
have a pretty compact discussion on that. I have additional, things I'd like to talk about on this, so,
Yeah, I don't
think
feel
green
like, I
space-
feel like I
So,
talked too much, and I haven't heard enough from you to come up with a draft 2 yet, except
Yeah.
for Jeff's suggestion about phasing.
yeah, no, I've
One piece.
got a few
So-
suggestions, so,
You
So,
running the
uh,
meeting, I'm just telling you, you had some ideas about keeping the timeline, so if you wanna
Well-
continue the discussion, then maybe I'll hold off on drafting a version 2 until after the next meeting.
I think so, I'd like to close up. If
Okay.
if
That's-
other
that's
folks are
fine, I
amenable
just
to
wanted
that. So that means putting off, having additional discussion on this. Is there anything else for the 23rd that,
Nope,
will you
you're-
have anything else for us to look at in terms of
I
design
think-
standards?
I don't think I'm gonna continue working on them. I don't wanna
Okay.
put any more in front of you because I want you to finish the discussion
Yeah.
of these. And I think the Hannaford conversation will take some time.
Yeah,
I also would like to finish the map that I promised and have that up. So that's probably gonna take a little bit of my time.
all right. So, are folks all right with that? Yeah.
A quick comment. I was not part of the conversation of the drafting of these new standards, and I know you worked hard on it, and it reflects well, but I feel like I want something more specific and more substantial, and I don't know what that is yet. But to me, it feels very general, and maybe that's what we were going for.
Well, so think about it between
Yeah.
now and the next meeting, Barbara, and maybe come meet with me or drop by and we
Yeah.
can chat some more. And then, part of your feedback at the next meeting can be, here are some specific things I'd like to see, or here are some desires I'd like to see that, and
Okay.
can we have more specificity? This really is just a first draft. Whatever
Yeah.
you want to do to it is,
And the
Fine.
minutes had captured a good part of the discussion, but, it would be 20 pages to capture everything, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
would it be all right?
Okay, so-
Maggie and I work together on the agenda, but I'm just thinking out loud with Dennis not being able to participate in the, and Rolf as well, choosing not to participate in the Hannaford piece of this.
To put that
To put
second.
that at the end instead of at the
Yeah.
beginning, and that way they can come and then leave at a reasonable hour, and the rest of you are relegated to the late night.
Yeah, especially since we gave the audience this week they could come
That's right.
early. Next week they'll have to stay up past their bedtime, so. Okay. All right, let's do that then. So let's see. Let's move on to minutes of the April 25th meeting. Does anyone have any?
I just think there should be
Comments?
somewhere there that I left the meeting, I think. I didn't see it there anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Or do we need to, or?
Absolutely, yeah. If it's not in there, then we ought to add it. And
I think
Don, do you know when Dennis left, or you need some help on that?
I went, as soon as the Hannaford application came up,
Yeah, that's essentially
I
it.
thought I
right?
read that. Maybe not.
Note that he was
Yeah.
smiling.
Yeah, right. Yeah, big
you
smile.
made up for it this week, though.
Yes, put in that, at what time Alex had to go in to the town clerk's office and wake Dennis up to come into the meeting, right.
I'll have you know, he was hard at work, I'm sure, reviewing design standards.
Absolutely,
Signing
I'm sure.
Mylars, yes.
All right. All right, motion to approve the minutes,
So moved.
As amended?
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now, let's see, other business and correspondence. The water matters. Do we have copies of the takeaways?
But now that you say that, I don't think I have them. So I apologize for that. I put them in your packets. Was that? is
No,
everyone-
actually,
You didn't see them in
they
the
weren't
Dropbox?
attachment, oh, they were in the Dropbox, all right.
So, for those of you that
Yeah.
don't have a lot of fun with Dropbox, why don't I email you those Water Matters summaries? These were summaries of the workshop
Well-
that we helped sponsor.
Yeah, there was a summary which is quite long and very detailed for folks who weren't there, and then I think the takeaways or next steps, I think
Yes,
they
there was a
called it.
separate document
Next
that was
steps.
sort of like trying to push the planning commission along.
Right.
With ideas. And actually, weren't you saying that you were interested in having Marty Illick come to the next meeting to,
Marty is interested in coming. I'm
do you want
wondering
to put her
about,
off, actually?
I'm wondering about putting that off so folks can have a chance to read that next steps document.
Well, you and I can figure that out from
Yeah.
an agenda standpoint,
Yeah.
but I will, since I know not everybody is big on Dropbox, if I email you these summary documents, everybody gets email attachments,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I'll email the Water Matters summaries. I apologize.
In the Dropbox, you had the whole item and the summary,
Yeah,
right?
And
But you're gonna,
separate next steps, it looks like.
yes, the both documents that I'll email you were in the Dropbox, so if you're Dropbox savvy, you have them.
Yep.
But, just in case, I'll email them along. As you probably deduced from Maggie and I going back and forth, Marty Illick from Lewis Creek Association wanted you to have that, you helped sponsor the workshop. And she was interested in coming in to just talk with you about how you could maybe use some of this with regard to your village growth area rezoning.
So that we'll probably have that discussion in June at some point.
not at the next meeting, right?
Not at the
Not
next
at the
meeting,
next
no.
And then Barbara, you had an announcement to make, right? A reminder?
For those of you who are interested in participating in the community dinner Friday, May 25th, it's coming up. The select board is going to be there and some of us. The food will be Italian themed. The dinner goes from 5:30 to 7 at the United Church Hall, and it's a great way to meet people in the community. And
And to be more specific, Barbara brought this to you some time ago and said, would the planning commission be willing to provide some of the food for it? And everyone just sort of nodded and said,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I could do that. So this is your reminder that now we have to actually do it. So I'm gonna email you the details
Specifics,
that
yeah.
Barbara's been compiling, so you have a document that you can refer to.
Do we cook in the kitchen there?
well, you can heat things.
It's more cook ahead, bring early and warm it up kind of a thing. At least that's what I'm gonna do with my lasagna.
You're making lasagna?
That's my plan.
What date again?
Friday, May 25. And if
So-
you can let me know what you might bring. I mean, it's okay if we have duplicates, it's just, want to be sure we have enough food.
Well, like, what's the menu?
Italian, whatever that means to you, I guess.
How many people come?
Between 40 and 60. The last time we had an Italian one, we had closer to 60. So it's a popular dinner.
I mean, should like everyone make lasagna or?
That'd be awesome.
Somebody's gotta make goulash, right? Come on.
Hungarian. That doesn't.
Well, I was
It's not
gonna-
Italian, is
It's
it?
not
Darn it.
Italian.
Yeah, I'm gonna do stuffed
Close
shells and
enough.
biscotti.
You could do a salad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, salads.
All
So
right.
I'm gonna send an email around
Okay.
and encourage you to talk to that person at the end of the table
All right.
about what you might wanna bring so she can help coordinate.
Can we just bring a bunch of wine? That's Italian.
I want to know what Dennis juice.
What?
What are you gonna bring?
Himself.
Oh.
His
Italian maple
appetite.
syrup.
That's what I was thinking, Italian.
Yeah.
Italian soda with maple
I'll
syrup.
probably bring something, but I'm definitely not the one gonna be cooking it though.
At least you're honest.
All right. Any other? Anything else? Any other business? Correspondence? Postcards? Fan mail?
Plant sale this weekend.
That's
in
right.
the rain.
No, oh, is it gonna rain in the morning?
Saturday, yeah,
Oh, I hope not till the afternoon,
I know.
That would be a bummer.
sorry. I interrupted you.
No, it's okay, I was just saying community yard sale as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It rained last year too, didn't it? Seems as though it did. Maybe it was,
Last year was beautiful.
was it? Year before then?
Yep.
All right then. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, everyone. We are done.